I refused to let my sister use my house as a free vacation home, and she broke in anyway. When I called the police, my entire family turned against me. I, Emily, 34F, never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am. My sister, Sarah, 39F, has always been the golden child in our family. Growing up, she got the better room, the newer clothes, and more attention from our parents. I learned to live with it, and we actually had a decent relationship as adults, that is, until last month when everything blew up. I've been working as a remote software developer for the past 6 years, which has allowed me to buy a nice 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. It's not a mansion, but it's my sanctuary, with a beautiful garden I've put countless hours into. Meanwhile, Sarah and her husband, Tom, 41M, live in a small apartment in the city with their 2 kids, Lily, 7F, and Noah, 5M. They're always complaining about how cramped they are, but refuse to move somewhere more affordable because they're city people. The drama started when I mentioned during a family dinner that I'd be going on a 3-week work trip to Europe. My company is opening a branch there, and they wanted me to help set things up. As soon as the words left my mouth, Sarah's eyes lit up. She immediately started talking about how perfect it would be for her family to house us it while I was away. Before I could even respond, she was already on her phone, looking at local attractions and planning their vacation. I was taken aback but tried to be polite. I explained that I wasn't comfortable having 4 people staying in my house while I was gone, especially since her kids are pretty rowdy. Sarah has a very LAX parenting style, and the few times they visited, things have gotten broken or stained. I suggested they could come over for a day or 2 to use the yard, but not stay overnight. Sarah's face instantly changed. She claimed I was being selfish for having all this space that I don't even need, while her family was suffering in their small apartment. She said it was the perfect opportunity for her kids to experience suburban life and have a yard to play in. When I stood firm, she started crying and said I was punishing her children because of petty childhood jealousy. Our mom, who was also at dinner, immediately jumped to Sarah's defense. She said I should be more understanding of how hard it is to raise kids in the city and that family should help family. Dad stayed quiet, as usual. I felt cornered but didn't back down. I said my decision was final and I'd already arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, 68F, to check on the house and water my plants. The next day, Sarah sent a group text to our entire extended family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins, saying how disappointed she was that I wouldn't help her family have one nice vacation and how I was hoarding my house all to myself. Several family members messaged me privately, urging me to reconsider and be the bigger person. I held my ground, but things escalated when I found out Sarah had gone behind my back and gotten a copy of my house key from our mom, who had my spare for emergencies. I only discovered this when Mrs. Thompson called me 3 days after I'd left for Europe to say she'd seen people going into my house. I immediately video called Sarah, who answered from my living room with a wine glass in hand. She looked surprised but not ashamed and said they were just getting settled in and that I wouldn't even know they were there. In the background, I could see Noah jumping on my couch while Lily was going through my bookshelf. Tom was nowhere to be seen. I was livid and told her they needed to leave immediately or I'd call the police for breaking and entering. She laughed it off, saying I was overreacting and that family can't break into families' homes. I ended the call and immediately contacted Mrs. Thompson, asking her to go over and make sure they left. I also called our parents, who were shocked that Sarah had actually used the key, but still thought I was being too harsh. Mrs. Thompson texted me an hour later, saying she'd gone over, but Sarah refused to leave, claiming they had my permission. At this point, I was shaking with anger. I called my local police department's non-emergency line, explained the situation, and asked if an officer could check on my home. The police did go by, and according to Mrs. Thompson, who watched from her window, there was quite a scene. Sarah was yelling and crying while the kids were running around confused. Tom had apparently been at work and rushed home when Sarah called him. They finally left after the police made it clear they had no legal right to be there. I immediately had Mrs. Thompson change my locks and kept the new key with her until I returned. Then I blocked Sarah on everything and told my parents I needed space from all of them for enabling this insanity. When I got back from Europe, my house was thankfully in one piece. But there were stains on my carpet, scratches on my hardwood floors, and someone had clearly rifled through my personal belongings. They'd also left their trash, and my refrigerator was completely emptied of the food I'd left. It's been 3 weeks since I got back, and I've been getting nonstop calls and texts from family members saying I need to apologize to Sarah for humiliating her by involving the police. Apparently, she's been crying to anyone who will listen about how I made her children feel like criminals, and now they're having nightmares. My parents think I overreacted and should have just let them stay since the damage was already done. Even my brother, Daniel 36M, who is usually on my side, thinks I went too far by calling the police. I've been firm that I'm not apologizing for protecting my property from people who broke into my house, but the family pressure is getting intense. I'm starting to feel like I'm going crazy, Emily, for refusing to let my sister use my house and then calling the police when she broke in. Update. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and things have somehow gotten even worse. Thanks to everyone who commented and validated that I wasn't crazy for calling the police. It really helped me stay strong through what happened next. The day after I posted, I received a formal-looking envelope in the mail. Inside was an itemized bill from Tom for expenses incurred during their stay at my house and for emotional damages caused to their children. The list included things like gas money to drive to my suburb, food they purchased to restock my fridge which they emptied, cleaning supplies they allegedly bought, and I'm not making this up, $2,000 for therapy sessions their kids would supposedly need after the police incident. The total came to nearly $3,500, with a note that said they expected payment within 30 days or they would explore legal options. I laughed out loud when I read it because it was so absurd. I took pictures and sent them to my lawyer friend, Rachel 34F, who confirmed it was complete nonsense and advised me to ignore it. Meanwhile, the family drama intensified. My mom called to tell me that Sarah had been hospitalized for stress-induced exhaustion. She heavily implied it was my fault and that I should visit her. I declined and said that while I hoped Sarah felt better soon, I wasn't ready to see her after what she'd done. Mom got upset and said I was being heartless. Later that day, Daniel called me with more details. Apparently, Sarah wasn't actually hospitalized. She had gone to the ER complaining of chest pains, was given anti-anxiety medication, and sent home the same day. But she'd been telling everyone she was under medical care for the trauma I caused her. Daniel admitted he was starting to see through her dramatics, but still thought family peace was more important than who was right or wrong. Things reached a new level when I got home from grocery shopping to find my parents and Sarah sitting on my front porch. Sarah looked terrible, puffy-eyed and pale, and leapt up as soon as she saw me. She started crying and apologizing, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and didn't know what came over her. She claimed she truly thought I wouldn't mind if they stayed at my place. I was suspicious of this sudden change of heart, especially with my parents there as witnesses. I let them in, but made it clear this wouldn't be a long visit. Once inside, Sarah's apology quickly turned into more manipulation. She explained that they were being evicted from their apartment because of noise complaints from neighbors, and they needed a place to stay just for a month or two until they found somewhere new. She said it was partially my fault because the kids were acting out due to the trauma of the police incident. I was stunned by the audacity. Not only was she not genuinely sorry, but she was trying to use this apology as a way to move into my house. I told her absolutely not, and that her eviction problems were her own to solve. My dad finally spoke up, saying I was being cruel and that real family wouldn't let relatives become homeless. I pointed out that they could stay with them in their 4-bedroom house, where Sarah and I grew up. They got quiet and made excuses about how their house wasn't set up for children. The truth came out when I pressed them. They didn't want Sarah, Tom, and the kids living with them either. They knew exactly how disruptive and entitled they were, but it was easier to push them onto me than deal with it themselves. I called them out on their hypocrisy, and my dad got angry, saying I'd changed and become selfish since buying my house. After they left, I got a string of nasty texts from Sarah, saying I'd revealed my true colors and that she was going to tell everyone in the family how I was making them homeless. Within hours, my social media was flooded with messages from extended family, some concerned, others outright hostile. My aunt even posted a passive-aggressive status about certain people who value property over family. I decided to get ahead of the narrative and posted a factual account of what happened, how they took my key without permission, broke into my house, refused to leave when caught, and were now trying to guilt me into letting them move in after sending me a bill for breaking into my property. I included pictures of the bill and the damage they'd done to my house. The family reaction was split. Some were shocked at Sarah's behavior and messaged me privately to apologize for judging me. Others doubled down, saying I was airing dirty laundry and making things worse. My cousin, Olivia 37F, who has always been close to Sarah, accused me of doctoring the photos and making the whole thing up for attention. The most surprising development came when Tom's brother, James 43M, reached out to me. He apologized for his brother's behavior and revealed that this wasn't the first time they pulled something like this. Apparently, they'd been kicked out of James's vacation cabin last year after staying there without permission and causing extensive damage. He had kept quiet about it to keep the peace, but felt I deserved to know I wasn't their first victim. I'm now seriously considering going low or no contact with Sarah and anyone who continues to enable her behavior. My parents are furious that I won't help family in need, but I'm standing firm. I've installed security cameras around my property and made it clear to Miss S. Thompson that no one is to enter my house without my explicit permission, even in an emergency. I know I've handled this whole mess as best I could, but I'm curious, what would you do about the ongoing family fallout? Cut contact completely or try to maintain relationships with those who haven't completely taken Sarah's side? Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and there have been some unexpected developments. First, thank you to everyone who encouraged me to maintain my boundaries. Your support has been invaluable during this difficult time. After my last post, I did what many of you suggested. I went low contact with most of my family and completely blocked Sarah. I changed my number and only gave it to Daniel and a few trusted relatives who had been supportive. This gave me some much-needed peace for about 2 weeks. Then Daniel called with news that changed everything. Sarah, Tom, and the kids had indeed been evicted and had moved in with our parents. According to Daniel, who visited them, it was complete chaos. Lily and Noah were running wild through the house. Tom was barely helping, and Sarah was constantly fighting with our mom about parenting and household rules. My dad was spending most of his time in the garage to avoid the drama. After just 10 days, my mom called me in tears. She apologized profusely for not believing me and admitted that Sarah's behavior was worse than she'd realized. She asked for advice on setting boundaries, which was ironic considering how she dismissed my boundaries just weeks earlier. I was civil but kept the conversation brief, still hurt by her previous lack of support. 2 days later, I received an email from Tom. It was surprisingly humble and straightforward. He explained that he'd lost his job 3 months ago but had hidden it from everyone, including Sarah. They weren't actually being evicted for noise complaints. They couldn't pay their rent. He'd been pretending to go to work while actually spending his days at the library, applying for jobs and trying to figure out their financial mess. When I mentioned my Europe trip at that family dinner, Sarah saw it as a perfect opportunity for a free vacation and a way to hide their financial problems from the family a bit longer. Tom claimed he was against breaking in, but went along with it after Sarah wore him down. He apologized for the damage to my house and the ridiculous bill, which was Sarah's idea. He ended by saying he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just wanting me to know the full story. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process this new information. Part of me felt vindicated that I wasn't overreacting, but another part felt sad that things had gotten so out of hand. A week later, Daniel invited me to lunch, where he revealed more family secrets. Apparently, our parents were at their breaking point with Sarah's family living with them. Mom had finally set some house rules, and Sarah had responded with a full meltdown, accusing her of never supporting her and always favoring me. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel or me. The biggest shock came when Daniel mentioned that our parents were considering selling their house to downsize partly because of retirement, but also to force Sarah's family to find their own place. They hadn't told Sarah yet, but had asked Daniel to test the waters with me about potentially reconciling, as they were worried about family harmony once they dropped this bombshell. I was conflicted. On one hand, I was still angry about how my parents had handled everything. On the other hand, I could see they were finally understanding the reality of Sarah's behavior that I've been dealing with for years. After much thought, I agreed to a small family meeting at a neutral location, a private room at a local restaurant, just my parents, Daniel and me. No Sarah or Tom. The meeting was tense at first, but ultimately productive. My parents gave a genuine apology, acknowledging they'd enabled Sarah's behavior her entire life and hadn't been fair to me. Dad admitted he'd stayed quiet during the conflict because he knew I was right but was afraid of upsetting Sarah. We talked about healthy boundaries and what a path forward might look like. I made it clear that while I was willing to work on our relationship, I would not be offering my home to Sarah under any circumstances. They agreed this was reasonable and promised to respect my decisions going forward. When the topic turned to their plans to sell the house, I surprised myself by offering to help them look for a smaller place and assist with the moving process. The relief on their faces was palpable. They'd clearly been worried I would refuse any contact. As for Sarah, I'm still keeping my distance. Daniel tells me that Tom has found a new job, though with a significant pay cut. They're looking for affordable housing, but the rental market in our area is challenging. My parents have given them a 3-month deadline to move out, which is causing daily arguments. I'm taking things one day at a time, focusing on rebuilding trust with my parents and maintaining my boundaries. While I don't foresee a reconciliation with Sarah anytime soon, I'm at peace with my decisions and no longer feel guilty about protecting myself and my home. The security cameras are staying up, though. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm happy to report that things have finally reached a resolution, though not the one anyone expected. After my last post, my parents followed through on their plan to sell their house. They found a nice 2-bedroom condo in a 55-plus community that they absolutely love. The sale forced Sarah and her family to finally address their housing situation, as the condo explicitly prohibited long-term guests under their HOA rules. With their deadline approaching, Sarah and Tom intensified their search for affordable housing. Tom was working again, but at a much lower salary, and they were struggling to find anything in the city that they could afford. This led to Sarah reaching out to me directly for the first time since our confrontation. The message was surprisingly humble. She acknowledged her terrible behavior, the years of entitlement, and the damage she'd caused to our relationship. She explained that the events of the past few months had forced her to reflect on her actions and recognize patterns she hadn't been willing to see before. She didn't ask for anything, not money, not housing, not even forgiveness. She simply wanted me to know that she was working on herself. I was cautious but agreed to meet her for coffee at a neutral location. Our conversation was awkward at first, but gradually became more genuine. She shared that she'd started therapy for real this time, after hitting rock bottom when our parents announced their move. Her therapist had helped her recognize her lifelong pattern of manipulation and entitlement. What surprised me most was her acknowledgement that her behavior stemmed from insecurity. Despite being the golden child, She'd always felt inadequate compared to my independence and self-sufficiency. Breaking into my house had been a misguided attempt to take something she perceived I had that she didn't: stability and security. While I appreciated her insights, I made it clear that understanding her motivations didn't erase what she'd done. She agreed completely and said she wasn't expecting an immediate reconciliation, just opening the door to possibly rebuilding trust someday. As for their housing situation, they'd made a decision that shocked everyone. They were moving to a smaller city about 3 hours away, where Tom had been offered a better job and housing was more affordable. Sarah had found work as an administrative assistant at a local school, which would allow her to have the same schedule as her kids. They found a small but nice apartment within their budget and were actually excited about the fresh start. The move happened 2 months ago, and from what I've heard through Daniel and occasional texts from Sarah herself, they're doing well. The kids have adjusted to their new school, and both Sarah and Tom seem less stressed now that they're living within their means. Sarah sends updates but doesn't push for more contact than I'm comfortable with, which I appreciate. My relationship with my parents has improved significantly. With Sarah no longer physically present and draining their resources, they've been able to enjoy their retirement and have even started acknowledging the unhealthy family dynamics they enabled for years. We have dinner together twice a month, and while we don't dwell on the past, there's a new honesty between us that feels healing. As for me, the whole experience led to some unexpected positive changes. The security system I installed after the break-in caught an actual attempted burglary at my house, which might have gone unnoticed otherwise. I've also become closer with Mrs. Thompson and some other neighbors, creating a supportive community I hadn't prioritized before. Last month, I invited Daniel and his family over for a barbecue and extended the invitation to my parents as well. It was the first family gathering I'd hosted since everything happened, and it went surprisingly well. There was an unspoken agreement to focus on moving forward rather than rehashing the past. Sarah sent a text afterward, saying she understood why she wasn't invited but hoped that someday she might be included again. I told her honestly that I wasn't ready yet, but appreciated her understanding and respect for my boundaries. I don't know if Sarah and I will ever have the kind of close relationship that siblings ideally should, but I'm no longer filled with anger when I think about her. The distance, both physical and emotional, has been healing, allowing me to focus on the relationships that add value to my life rather than drain me. The whole experience taught me that standing firm on boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes, it takes a dramatic upheaval for people to recognize unhealthy patterns and make changes.